What's going on YouTube? Mr. Wheels here once again. Welcome to another edition of Sports Talk. This is part 2 of the 2014-2015 NHL season preview. Looking at the Metropolitan division in part 2. I believe this division should have been called the All-American division instead of the Metropolitan division because there are no Canadian teams in this division. The Metropolitan, it's just kind of weird. But anyway, before I get into looking at all the teams, I'd ask you to, as always, like this video, subscribe to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter at Sledgehead86 and like my Facebook fan page, Mr. Wheels86. The links will be in the description down below. Now, let's get started here. Starting with the Washington Capitals, they were 38, 30, and 14 last season. They were 5th in the Metropolitan Division, but unfortunately for the Caps, they missed the playoffs for the first time in 7 years. This prompted a coaching change. Adam Oates is out. Barry Trotz is the new head coach. They also fired longtime general manager George McPhee, and I forget who replaced him. In terms of the subtractions from their team from last year, Mikhail Grabovski is gone, Tyson Strachan, and Yaroslav Halak. They've added a lot on the defensive end. Matt Niskanen and Brooks Orpik were signed to significant contracts through free agency. They also picked up backup goalie Justin Peters and Chris Connor. So in my opinion, the Caps defense has gotten much better. Not so much in terms of the numbers that they're going to put up offensively, but they're going to be a much more physical defense core, and that will help protect guys like Ovechkin and Backstrom and Johansson and all those guys. And the big question mark for me is Braden Holtby. Is he going to be number one? I don't think Justin Peters is going to be a clear-cut number one goalie. So in terms of Yaroslav Halak leaving the team, that really has me questioning their goaltending. But they've got an upgrade. They've upgraded defensively, so they should be tougher to play against. And their offense should have no problem scoring. So in my opinion, they're going to be no worse than third in the division. And hopefully better than that. And at best case scenario, they could contend for the Eastern Conference Finals. I wouldn't be surprised if they made it that far. I don't think they're a cup contender yet, but a deep run into the playoffs isn't out of the question. Let's move on to the Pittsburgh Penguins. They were 51, 24, and 7 last season. They lost in the second round of the playoffs to the New York Rangers. And they blew a 3-1 series lead to the Rangers on home ice. This resulted in big changes for the Penguins. GM Ray Shero was fired, and even though there was talk of Dan Bylsma sticking around, he was eventually fired. Jim Rutherford was Ray Shero's replacement as the GM, and Mike Johnson was the coaching replacement for Dan Bylsma. Now, in my opinion, the Penguins they lost some significant depth players off their team. James Neal, Jussi Jokinen, Matt Niskanen, Brooks Orpik, Tanner Glass, Chris Connor, Derek England, and Joe Vitale are all gone. They've all left through free agency. The Penguins did add some pieces though. Most notably, Patrick Hornquist. He is expected to fill the role that was left by James Neal, and will give them more of a net front presence. Nick Spalding was also joined the team along with Steve Doughty, Blake Como, Christian Ehrhoff, and Thomas Greiss. Now, for Penguins fans, they might think that the guys they added would be enough to make up for the people that they lost. And don't get me wrong, like Patrick Hornquist and Christian Ehrhoff will help the team, but they're going to be they're more of a finesse team anyway, and they lost some of their toughness. I think last season they were tougher to play against, not only because of their offense, but because, say you put the Crosby line out there, and, you've got Brooks Orpik on defense on that line. If anybody messes with Crosby, you got to deal with Brooks Orpik. Matt Niskanen is another physical defenseman who provided some help offensively. I don't know that the Penguins they didn't necessarily get worse, but I don't know how much better they got. And I think the other big question mark with the Penguins is, sure, they can roll through the regular season, and I'm not saying they can't finish, first in the division, but I don't think they got better in terms of having a big playoff run. I have no confidence in Marc-Andre Fleury. I don't think they addressed their goaltending situation. I don't think he's going to help win them another cup. I understand if they're many people's favorites to win the division, but competing for a cup, I don't think it's going to happen. I could see them being knocked out in the second round of the playoffs again. I think they actually may actually take a little bit of a step back this season, because again, this division is wide open. But let's move on to the Philadelphia Flyers. They were 42, 30, and 10 last season. This was good enough for third in the Metropolitan Division. They've got a new GM in Ron Hextall, who was their former goalie in the 80s and 90s. They lost Steve Downey, Bruno Gervais, Eric Gustafson, Scott Hartnell, Ben Holmstrom, Ty McGinn, and Chris Newberry are all gone. They added Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, Andrew Gordon, Blair Jones, Nick Schultz, Zach Stortini, RJ Umberger comes back to the team, and Rob Zepp, along with Michael Delzato. So there was the Flyers added some significant pieces for this season, but I don't know how much better it's actually going to make them. I wouldn't say they're any worse. I think best case scenario, they finish maybe second or third in the division. But if last season was any indication, they didn't get off to a very good start. I think they're going to finish more like fourth or fifth in the division, and their playoff hopes rest on getting that wild card spot. Best case scenario for them to make the playoffs. I don't think they will be. I don't think they will lock up one of the divisional playoff seats, but that's just my opinion. Let's move on to the New York Rangers. They were 45, 31, and 6 last season. Eventually lost to the LA Kings in the Stanley Cup Final. And I think they will compete for the top of the division this year. Despite having a great season last year, there was a lot of changes for this season. Anton Stroman, Brian Boyle, Brad Richards, Benoit Pouliot, and Derek Dorsett have all left the team. They added Dan Boyle, Tanner Glass, Mike Koska, Chris Mueller, and Matt Hudwick, and Matt Lombardi to the team for this season. But I think they've lost some scoring off the wing. Like their center depth isn't as good this season. Derek Stepan and Derek Brassard are probably going to be your first and second line centers. Losing Richards and Brad Richards and Benoit Pouliot, it's going to take away from their scoring. Not that they were a very high-scoring team last season. I mean, they were more of a scrappy team and really had to work for their offense, and that was evident during their playoff run, and probably a big reason why their Stanley Cup run ended in 5 games, because the LA Kings just had too much firepower for them, I think. But their saving grace, I think, is that they're still a tough team to play against. They're made up of more grinders and tough guys, in my opinion. And they've got Henrik Lundqvist, who's one of the best goalies in the league. So, all in all, they should compete for one of the divisional playoff spots. I'm going to say probably the second or third spot. Don't think they'll outright win the division. And worst case scenario, they could be the team to steal the wild card spot. But I don't think they'll be on the outside of the playoffs at all. So let's move on to the New York Islanders. They were 34, 37, and 11 last season, and that was dead last in the Metropolitan Division. They were the 8th spot. However, they had a big off season. This leading into their last season at the Nassau Coliseum on Long Island before moving to Brooklyn next season. Not too many players left the team in the off season. Evgeny Nabokov, who never really wanted to be in Long Island to begin with, and Anders Nielsen were the 2 guys to leave the team. They added Mikhail Grabovski, Nikolai Kulemin, Yaroslav Halak, Chad Johnson, Corey Conacher, TJ Brennan, and Jack Skilley. And in my opinion, the Islanders are I'm going to say they're my dark horse for the Metropolitan Division. Mikhail Grabovski will take some pressure off of John Tavares and hopefully gives them a solid number 2 center. Nikolai Kulemin should be on his line, and they played well together in Toronto. Yaroslav Halak gives them solid goaltending. Hopefully he can get back to the numbers that he put up when he was in Montreal. And I think they could easily contend. They could easily be the wild card team out of the Metropolitan Division. Best case scenario, probably they take the 3rd spot in the division. I don't think they'll be good enough for the top 2 spots, but they've definitely gotten better compared to some of the teams in their division. And I do think they will be very competitive and in a playoff spot. The only real question mark is their defense. It's a young defense, but they've got Yaroslav Halak now, so hopefully he will make up for some of the some of the mistakes the defense are expected to make, but we'll see. Moving on to the New Jersey Devils. They were 35, 29, and 18 last season. That was 6th in the Metropolitan Division. And they've got no Martin Brodeur this season, and big questions on defense. Anton Volchenkov and Mark Fane have left the team. They added Mike Camilleri and Martin Havlat. So they should have some more. That should give them a little bit more offense. They've never been much of an offensive team anyway. They've always been more of a. They've had Marty Brodeur for the last 20 years, so they've always been able to steal those, 2-1, 3-2 games. They haven't been they haven't been a big powerhouse in terms of offense. But Camilleri and Havlat will help out. Havlat is friends with Patrick Elias and Jaromir Jagr, so hopefully they'll have some chemistry there. But they took a hit on defense. Volchenkov, if he was anything, it was a big shot blocker. So their younger guys are going to have to really step up on defense. But I think the Devils are going to be on the outside of the playoff picture. I think Corey Snyder maybe he's going to be their number one, and everybody thinks he's capable of being a number one goalie. But I don't think they didn't really the Devils never really added anybody on defense. They just lost guys, so I think that's going to hurt them, and I really don't see them being in the playoff picture. That's just my opinion. Let's move on to Columbus. They were 43-32-7 last season. Lost to the Penguins in the first round. And my question for them is, can they take the next step? They lost a lot of players that could have helped them take that next step. Blake Como, Matt Fratton, RJ Umberger, Derek McKenzie, Nikita Nikitin, and Nick Schultz. They're gone. They added Scott Hartnell and Jerry D'Amigo. I'm going to keep this short. Best case scenario for Columbus, they get into the wild card. I don't think you'll see them at the top of the division. This is another team that is going to be probably 4th, 5th, or 6th in the division, middle of the pack. They're not going to be horrible, but they're a bubble team at best. Sorry if anybody disagrees with me, but that's just the way I feel. Let's move on to Carolina, the last team before we wrap this video up. They were 36-35-11 last season. That was 7th in the Metro Division. They got a new GM to replace Jim Rutherford. That is former Hurricane Ron Francis. Justin Peters and Manny Malhotra are gone from the team. They added Jay Clement, Brad Malone, and Tim Gleason. They're all on the team this year. For me, yeah, they added some depth players. They didn't really lose a whole lot, but they kind of stayed the same. So if Carolina's going to compete for a playoff spot, Eric Stahl, Jordan Stahl, Jeff Skinner, all those guys are really going to have huge seasons. Alex Semin, like all their top offensive players are really going to have to step it up. Tim Gleason will help them on defense. It was a short layover in Toronto for him. I'm surprised Carolina didn't go out and maybe pick up a Martin Brodeur just to back up Cam Ward, because Cam Ward has had injuries the last couple seasons, and with Justin Peters gone, they really don't have a backup goalie now. But Carolina, again, for me, they're another one of the bubble teams in the Metro Division. And that pretty much wraps up what I have to say, guys. Stay tuned in the next couple days for a preseason look at the Western Conference. That's the Central Division and the Pacific Division. And I will see you next time.